Captain Kim Dae-hyun stood on the bridge of the UFS Indomitable, watching the stars through the main viewing screen. His hands were clasped behind his back as he studied the peaceful darkness of space. The ship was humanity's newest and most advanced warship, built with technology borrowed from their alien allies in the Galactic Federation. But even with all that advanced tech, Dae-hyun knew that most other species still saw humans as the weak newcomers. "Sir, we're getting reports from the Helix Nebula," said Lieutenant Commander Lee Min-ho from his position at the tactical station. His voice was tight with worry. "The Vorthak Crystal Armada, they're gone." Dae-hyun turned around quickly. "Gone? What do you mean gone?" 500 ships, sir, all destroyed in less than 4 hours. Whatever hit them didn't leave much behind. Min-ho's fingers moved over his control panel, bringing up the sensor data on the main screen. The bridge fell silent as the crew stared at the images. Where the mighty Vorthak fleet had been, there was now only twisted metal and floating crystal fragments. The Vorthak had been one of the 3 most powerful civilizations in the galaxy for over 10,000 years. Their crystal ships could survive almost anything, and their energy weapons could cut through solid rock like it was paper. "How is that possible?" asked Dr. Choi Ji-won from her science station. She was a small woman with sharp eyes who never accepted simple answers. "The Vorthak shields can stop anything we know about." "I don't know," Min-ho replied. "But the Federation is calling an emergency meeting. All fleet commanders are ordered to report to Central Command immediately." Dae-hyun nodded slowly. He had been a ship captain for 15 years, ever since humanity joined the Federation. In all that time, he had never seen anything that could destroy a Vorthak fleet. "Set course for Central Command, maximum speed." The Indomitable turned and jumped into hyperspace, its experimental engines pushing it faster than most ships could travel. As they flew through the tunnel of twisted space and time, Dae-hyun thought about what this could mean. The galaxy had been at peace for decades. The 3 great powers, the Vorthak Empire, the Nexari Collective, and the Threnody Republic, kept things stable through their combined strength. When they arrived at Central Command, the massive space station was buzzing with activity. Ships from every member species were docked at the station's many arms. Emergency lights flashed red, and communication channels were flooded with worried voices speaking in dozens of different languages. Admiral Park So-young was waiting for Dae-hyun in the briefing room. She was a tall woman with gray hair and tired eyes. She had been fighting for humanity's place in the galaxy longer than anyone else in their fleet. Behind her stood representatives from the other major powers, tall crystal-like Vorthak beings that glowed with inner light, energy creatures from the Nexari that looked like living stars, and the heavily armored Threnody with their multiple arms and beetle-like faces. "Captain Kim," Admiral Park said as he entered the room, "I'm glad you're here. We need to discuss what happened at Helix Nebula." "What do we know?" Dae-hyun asked, taking his seat at the round table. War Commander Theklan of the Threnody spoke first. His voice came through a translator that made it sound like grinding metal. "Our enemy is unknown. They appeared from dark space beyond the galactic rim. Their ships are unlike anything in our databases." Crystal singer Velthara of the Vorthak glowed brighter as she spoke. "The attackers used biomechanical vessels, part machine, part living tissue. Our weapons had no effect on their ulls. Their weapons passed through our shields like they weren't there." Energy Marshal Luxandros of the Nexari pulsed with worried light. "They adapt. Every time we changed our attack patterns, they changed too. By the end of the battle, nothing we had could hurt them." Admiral Park looked around the table. "The Federation Council has decided to call these attackers the Devourer Armada. Long-range sensors show they're moving toward the Tau Ceti system, where the main Nexari fleet is stationed." "How many ships?" Dae-hyun asked. "At least 10,000. Theklan answered. "Maybe more. Our scouts can't get close enough to get exact numbers." The room fell quiet. 10,000 unknown ships with technology that could destroy the Vorthak Crystal Armada meant trouble like the galaxy had never seen. Dae-hyun looked at the holographic display showing the enemy's path of movement. They weren't just attacking military targets. They were consuming entire star systems, taking all the matter and energy for themselves. "What's the plan?" he asked. War Commander Theklan stood up, his armor making mechanical sounds. We combine our remaining fleets, the Nixari Energy Fleet, my Republic forces, and what's left of the Vorthak ships. We make a stand at the Rigel defense line. And humanity's contribution? Admiral Park asked. Your small fleet will support our main forces, Belthera said, her crystal body glowing dimmer. Your ships can provide cover for our evacuation ships when the battle goes badly. Daehyun felt his hands tighten into fists. Even now, facing the end of everything, the other species saw humans as barely useful. You're asking us to be cannon. Fodder. You're asking us to die so you can run away, Admiral Park added, her voice cold. Your ships are too primitive to help in a real battle, Theklan said bluntly. But they can buy us time. The meeting continued for hours, with the alien representatives making plans that treated humanity like a minor annoyance. Finally, Admiral Park had heard enough. She stood up and looked at each of the alien commanders. Humanity respectfully declines to participate in your defense plan, she said. The room went silent. Luxandros pulsed with confused energy. You refuse to help defend the galaxy? We refuse to throw our people away in a battle you've already decided to lose, Park replied. We'll find our own way to deal with this threat. As they left the briefing room, Daehyun walked beside his admiral. What's the real plan? He asked quietly. We go home, Park said. We gather every human ship we can find, and we figure out how to do what humans do best, which is find a way to win when everyone says it's impossible. 3 days later, news arrived that made everyone's worst fears come true. The Nexari Energy Fleet, 300 of the most advanced ships in the galaxy, had been completely destroyed at Tau Ceti. The battle had lasted only 6 hours. Like the Vorthak before them, the energy beings had tried everything they knew, but nothing worked against the Devourers. A week after that, the Threnody Republic's main war fleet met the enemy at the Rigel defense line. 800 ships, commanded by the best military minds the galaxy had ever produced, fought with everything they had. The battle lasted 2 days, longer than the others, but the result was the same. The Threnody fleet was shattered, with only a handful of ships escaping to bring word of the defeat. Now the Devourer Armada was moving toward the core systems of the galaxy, where billions of people lived on thousands of worlds. Panic spread from system to system as refugees fled ahead of the advancing enemy. The great civilizations that had ruled space for millennia were broken and scattered. The Indomitable was back in Earth's solar system now, along with every other human ship that could make the journey. The human fleet wasn't large, only 200 ships of all sizes from massive dreadnoughts to small patrol craft. But they were all gathered around humanity's home world, preparing for something that no one quite understood yet. Captain Daehyun stood in Admiral Park's office, looking out at the blue and green planet where his species had been born. Earth looked so peaceful from space with its white clouds and brown continents. It was hard to believe that somewhere out there, an unstoppable enemy was consuming entire civilizations. The Indomitable is our best hope, Admiral Park said, reviewing data on her computer screen. All that alien technology we've built into her, plus our own innovations. She's not like any other ship in the galaxy. What makes her so special? Daehyun asked. The Vorthak had better shields, the Nexari had more powerful weapons, and the Threnody had superior armor. Park smiled for the first time in weeks. They had better everything, but they thought like their own species. They used mathematical optimization, followed predictable patterns, trusted in what had always worked before. And we don't? Captain, humanity spent thousands of years fighting each other before we ever reached the stars. We learned to be unpredictable, to use psychology as much as physics, to find ways to win that shouldn't work, but somehow do. The Mo aliens never learned those lessons because they never needed to. She turned to face him directly. The Indomitable isn't just built with alien technology. She's built with human thinking, controlled chaos, impossible decisions, and the willingness to try things that make no mathematical sense. You want me to fight 10,000 enemy ships with one human ship? I want you to do what no alien species would ever think to do. I want you to go out there and confuse the hell out of them. Daehyun thought about this for a moment. It was crazy, but that was exactly what made it human. What about the rest of the fleet? They'll follow your lead when the time comes. But first, we need to see what the Indomitable can really do. That night, Daehyun called his senior officers to his quarters. Lieutenant Commander Lee Minho arrived first, followed by Dr. Choi Ji-won and Sergeant Major Bae Tae-hyun, the leader of the ship's marine units. They were all young by military standards, but they had grown up with The Devourer scout ship hung in space like a massive predator waiting to strike. Captain Kim Dae-hyun studied it through the Indomitable's sensors as his ship approached. The enemy vessel was 3 times larger than his own ship, with a hull that seemed to ripple and change as he watched. Parts of it looked like metal and machinery, while other sections pulsed like living tissue. Dr. Choi, what are your sensors telling us? Dae-hyun asked. Dr. Choi Ji-won looked up from her science station, her face pale with concentration. Captain, this thing is incredible. It's not just a ship, it's alive. The hull is made of some kind of biometal that grows and adapts. The weapon systems are organic neural networks connected to quantum computers. Can we hurt it? I don't know. Every time I scan a section it changes. The ship is literally adapting to our sensor frequencies in real time. Lieutenant Commander Lee Minho turned from his tactical station. Sir, the enemy ship is moving toward us. They're charging what looks like some kind of energy weapon. Daehyun felt his heart start beating faster. This was it. The first time a human ship would face the enemy that had destroyed 3 of the galaxy's greatest fleets. All hands, battle stations, raise shields and prepare to return fire. The bridge lights dimmed as the ship switched to combat mode. Red warning lights flashed as the crew prepared for battle. Through the viewing screen, Daehyun could see the enemy ship getting larger as it approached. Captain, Dr. Choi called out, I'm detecting some kind of scanning beam from the enemy ship. They're analyzing our hull, our weapons, our shield frequencies, everything. Let them look, Daehyun said. Minho, are you ready to implement our modifications? Yes, sir. All weapon systems have been reprogrammed according to our new parameters. This is either going to work brilliantly or get us killed. Very quickly, the enemy ship fired first. A beam of purple energy lanced out across space, striking the Indomitable's shields. The ship shook, but the shields held. Return fire, Daehyun ordered. But instead of firing in a straight line at the enemy's center mass like any logical tactical computer would suggest, the Indomitable's weapons fired in a complex spiral pattern that made no mathematical sense. The beams curved and twisted through space, some missing the target entirely while others struck from unexpected angles. The Devourer ship's shields absorbed most of the hits, but Daehyun could see confusion in the way the enemy vessel moved. It had been expecting predictable human weapons fire, not this chaotic pattern that seemed random but wasn't quite. Their shields are adapting to our weapon frequencies, Minho reported. But sir, they seem confused by our firing pattern. Good. Dr. Choi, activate the quantum uncertainty generator. This was one of their most experimental modifications. Instead of trying to make their ship more predictable and efficient like alien technology, they had built systems designed to be confusing and chaotic. The quantum uncertainty generator made it impossible for enemy sensors to get accurate readings on their position, speed, or heading. The Devourer ship fired again, but this time its energy beams passed harmlessly through empty space where the Indomitable should have been but wasn't. They're having trouble targeting us, Minho said with excitement in his voice. Their targeting systems are designed for predictable movement patterns. Then let's be as unpredictable as possible, Daehyun replied. Helm, evasive pattern, chaos 7. The Indomitable began moving in a pattern that looked completely random. It spun and twisted through space, changing direction every few seconds with no apparent logic. Any alien tactical computer would have dismissed such movement as inefficient, waste of energy, but it made the human ship nearly impossible to hit. For the next hour, the 2 ships danced around each other in deadly combat. The Devourer vessel was larger and more powerful, but it couldn't adapt to the humans' chaotic tactics. Every time it adjusted its weapons for one pattern, the Indomitable would switch to something completely different. Captain, Dr. Choi said. I'm getting some interesting readings from the enemy ship. Its bio-neural networks are showing signs of stress. I think we're actually confusing it. What do you mean? The ship's organic components are trying to process our behavior patterns, but there aren't any patterns to process. We're causing some kind of neural feedback loop in their systems. Daehyun smiled grimly. Then let's give it something really confusing to think about. Minho, prepare the singularity pulse. This was their most dangerous weapon, a modification that channeled energy from the ship's singularity drive through the weapon systems. It was incredibly powerful, but also incredibly risky. If something went wrong, it could create a black hole. That would destroy both ships. Sir, the singularity pulse is ready, but I have to warn you, we've never tested this at full power. Today seems like a good day to find out if it works, Daehyun said. Fire. The Indomitable's main weapon discharged a beam of energy that existed in multiple dimensions at once. It was a weapon that shouldn't have been possible according to known physics, but human engineers had built it anyway by ignoring the rules that limited other species. The beam struck the Devourer ship and passed right through its shields, as if they weren't there. The enemy vessel shuddered and pieces of its biometal hull began to break away. Direct hit, Minho shouted. Their shields can't adapt to weapons that don't follow normal physics. But the enemy wasn't finished. The Devourer ship began to change, its hull rippling and reshaping itself. New weapon ports opened along its sides, and it fired a spread of energy bolts that filled the space around the Indomitable. Evasive maneuvers, Daehyun ordered. The human ship twisted through the energy barrage, but several bolts struck home. The shields flickered and warnings flashed across the bridge displays. Shields down to 60%, Minho reported. They're adapting faster now. Whatever we did to confuse them before, they're learning from it. Then we need to do something they can't learn from, Daehyun said. He thought for a moment, then smiled. Dr. Choi, can you broadcast our ship's database on human military history? Sir? Everything. Every battle we ever fought, every strategy we ever used, every time humans fought other humans. Send it all to the enemy ship. Dr. Choi looked confused but started working on her console. Broadcasting now, but Captain, why would we want to give them our tactical information? Because human tactical information doesn't make sense unless you understand humans. And understanding humans is impossible unless you are human. The data stream flowed from the Indomitable to the Devourer ship. Thousands of years of human warfare, from ancient battles with swords and spears to modern space combat. The enemy's bio-neural networks began processing the information, trying to find patterns they could use. Within minutes, the Devourer ship began to slow down. Its movements became erratic and its weapon fire became less accurate. Captain, the enemy ship's neural networks are overloading, Dr. Choi reported with amazement. They're trying to process human military logic, but our tactics are so contradictory and chaotic that it's causing system failures. Human warfare never made sense to humans either, Daehyun said. We just got good at making it work anyway. The battle continued for another 10 hours. The Devourer ship was more powerful and more advanced, but it couldn't handle the sheer chaos of fighting humans. Every time it adapted to one tactic, the Indomitable would do something that violated everything the enemy had learned about warfare. Finally, something remarkable happened. The Devourer ship stopped shooting and began to withdraw. Sir, the enemy vessel is pulling back, Minho reported in disbelief. They're actually retreating. Daehyun stared at the viewing screen as the massive enemy ship turned away from Earth and began to accelerate toward deep space. In all the reports from the destroyed fleets, no one had ever mentioned a Devourer ship retreating from battle. Wind it go, he said. We've learned what we needed to learn. Which is what, sir? Dr. Choi asked. That they can be beaten. They're incredibly advanced and adaptive, but they can't handle true chaos. They can't understand an enemy that doesn't follow rules. As the Devourer scout ship disappeared into the darkness between stars, the Indomitable turned back toward Earth. They had won the first battle, but Daehyun knew it was just the beginning. Minho, send a message to Admiral Park. Tell her the test was successful. The enemy can be confused and defeated, But we're going to need every trick humanity has ever learned. What about the main fleet? Dr. Choi asked. Our sensors detected over 10,000 ships heading this way. Daehyun looked out at the stars where somewhere in the darkness, an enemy armada was approaching Earth. Any logical species would evacuate and run. Any reasonable commander would admit defeat and try to save as many lives as possible. But humans had never been particularly logical or reasonable. We'll face them when they get here, he said, and we'll show them what happens when you threaten humanity's home. 3 days later, long-range sensors confirmed what they had all been dreading. The main Devourer armada was approaching the Sol system. Over 10,000 biomechanical ships, each one the size of a space station. They were moving in perfect formation, like a swarm of metallic locusts ready to consume everything in their path. Back on Earth, Admiral Park So-young called an emergency meeting of all human fleet commanders. The briefing room was packed with captains and commodores. The combined fleet hung in space at the edge of the Sol system, waiting for the final order to depart. Captain Kim Dae-hyun stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, looking at the tactical display that showed their small force of 250 ships. Against them was coming the largest enemy armada anyone had ever seen, over 10,000 Devourer vessels that had already proven they could destroy any opposition. Captain, Lieutenant Commander Lee Min-ho said quietly, the other ship commanders are requesting a final briefing before we jump to hyperspace. Dae-hyun nodded. This would be the last time all the commanders spoke together. In a few hours, most of them would be dead. Put me through to the fleet. The communication system connected him to every ship in their desperate alliance. Human voices mixed with the translated words of Threnody warriors, Vorthak crystal singers, and Nexari energy beings. They were all different species with different cultures, but today they were united by one thing: the decision to fight impossible odds rather than surrender. This is Captain Kim Dae-hyun of the UFS Indomitable, he began. In 30 minutes, we'll jump to the Vega system to meet the Devourer Armada. I won't lie to you about our chances. We're outnumbered 40-1 by an enemy that has never been defeated. He paused, looking around his own bridge at the faces of his crew. Dr. Choi Ji-won was checking her science station one more time. Min-ho was reviewing weapon configurations. Sergeant Major Bae Tae-hyun was making sure his Marines were ready for whatever came next. But we have something the Devourers don't understand, Dae-hyun continued. We have the willingness to sacrifice everything for others. We have the courage to stand up to bullies even when we know we can't win. And most importantly, we have each other. War Prince Kethtar's voice came through the comm system, translated from his natural clicking language. Today, we die with honor. Our names will be remembered. Today we show the galaxy what real courage looks like, added crystal singer Velthara, her words shimmering with harmonic frequencies. Energy Marshal Luxandros pulsed with bright light as he spoke. Today we prove that some things matter more than survival. Dae-hyun felt a swell of pride as he listened to these former enemies declaring their willingness to die alongside humanity. 6 months ago, most of them had dismissed humans as primitive, newcomers. Now they were following a human captain into a battle they couldn't win. All ships, prepare for hyperspace jump, he ordered. Destination, Vega system. May we all find peace in whatever comes next. The fleet disappeared into hyperspace, leaving the Sol system behind. Earth hung in the darkness like a blue jewel, home to 8 billion humans who would never know if their sacrifice had mattered until it was too late to say goodbye. The journey through hyperspace took 6 hours. During that time, the crew of the Indomitable made their final preparations. Dr. Choi worked with her engineering teams to prepare the Prometheus protocol, the controlled overload that would turn their singularity drive into a weapon of massive destruction. The process was incredibly dangerous and had never been tested at full scale. How sure are we that this will work? Dae-hyun asked her as they reviewed the technical specifications. Mathematically, it should create a localized black hole that will expand for approximately 3 seconds before collapsing, Dr. Choi replied. The gravitational distortion should destroy everything within a 3 light-year radius. Should? She gave him a tired smile. Captain, we're dealing with forces that can tear apart space and time itself. Should is the best answer I can give. Lieutenant Commander Minho was having his own challenges. The tactical computers were struggling to develop battle plans against such overwhelming odds. Every simulation ended with the complete destruction of their small fleet within the first few minutes of combat. The computers keep telling me this is impossible, he told Daehyun. No matter what tactics I program, we can't survive long enough to get close to their main formation. Then we'll have to do something the computers can't predict, Daehyun replied. Something so crazy that even we don't know if it will work. Sergeant Major Bae Taehyun was preparing his Marines for what might be the strangest mission in military history. If they managed to survive long enough, his teams would attempt to board Devourer ships and plant explosive charges directly inside their hulls. Sir, my people are ready, he reported. We've modified our combat suits with quantum phase shifters from Dr. Choi's lab. If her theory is right, we should be able to walk through Devourer hull armor like it's not there. And if her theory is wrong, Bae shrugged. Then we die very quickly instead of slowly. Either way, we're going to cause some damage. When the fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the Vega system, the sight that greeted them was beyond anything they had imagined. The system's sun was dimmed by the massive shadow of the Devourer armada. 10,000 biomechanical vessels spread across space like a plague of metallic locusts. Each ship was the size of a small city, covered in living metal that pulsed, with absorbed energy from the civilizations they had consumed. What had once been the thriving colony world of Vega Prime was now a hollow shell, its atmosphere stripped away and its surface carved into geometric patterns that fed energy to the waiting fleet. The sight made even the most hardened warriors among the Allied fleet pause in horror. My God, Dr. Choi whispered. They've turned an entire planet into a power source. The Devourer ships detected their arrival immediately. Warning signals flashed across the bridges of every Allied vessel as thousands of biomechanical predators turned toward them like sharks sensing blood in the water. All ships battle formation, Daehyun ordered. Remember, our goal isn't to win a traditional battle. We just need to get close enough to activate the Prometheus Protocol. The Allied fleet arranged itself with the Indomitable at the center, surrounded by the remaining human ships and their alien allies. It was a tiny dot of defiance against the overwhelming darkness of the enemy armada. The first Devourer attack came as a wave of energy beams that lit up space like deadly fireworks. The Allied ships scattered, using every evasive maneuver they had learned in decades of warfare. Several vessels were hit immediately. A Threnody cruiser exploded in a ball of flame, and a Vorthak crystal ship shattered into a million glittering pieces. Return fire, Daehyun shouted. The Allied fleet struck back with everything they had. Human singularity beams mixed with Threnody kinetic rounds, Vorthak crystal lances, and Nexari energy bolts. For a moment, space was filled with the light of 100 different weapon types all firing at once. But the Devourer ships adapted quickly. Their biomechanical hulls shifted and changed, deflecting attacks that would have destroyed any normal vessel. Worse, they began to learn from each hit, making themselves immune to weapons that had damaged them only moments before. They're adapting, faster than before, Minho reported. Whatever we did to the scout ship, the main fleet learned from it. Then we need to teach them something new, Daehyun replied. Dr. Choi, activate the chaos field generators on all human ships. This was another of their experimental modifications. Devices that created random quantum fluctuations around their vessels. The technology made their ships harder to target and weapons less predictable, but it also made their own systems less reliable. The effect was immediate. Human ships began moving in patterns that seemed to violate physics, appearing in one location and instantly materializing somewhere else. Their weapons fired in spirals and curves that defied mathematical logic. The Devourer targeting systems designed to predict and counter logical behavior struggled to keep up with such chaotic tactics. It's working, Minho said excitedly. We're confusing their targeting computers. But the celebration was short-lived. The Devourer fleet began adapting again, this time by using overwhelming numbers instead of precision. If they couldn't predict where the human ships would be, They would simply fill all of space with deadly energy. The Allied fleet found itself flying through a storm of destruction. Energy beams crossed space in every direction, creating a deadly maze that seemed impossible to navigate. Ships exploded all around them as the smaller vessels succumbed to the massive firepower. "We're losing too many ships too quickly," War Prince Kethtar reported through the comm system. "At this rate, none of us will survive long enough to reach their main formation." Daehyun made a decision that would have seemed insane to any logical commander. "All ships, direct course for the center of their formation. Maximum speed, no evasive maneuvers." "Sir?" Minho looked at him in shock. "That's suicide." "We're already on a suicide mission," Daehyun replied. "The only question is whether we die uselessly or die accomplishing something." The Allied fleet turned as one and accelerated directly toward the heart of the Devourer Armada. It was the most desperate charge in galactic history. Less than 200 surviving ships flying straight into the guns of 10,000 enemies. The Devourers seemed surprised by this direct approach. Their weapons had been designed to fight enemies who used logical tactics and evasive maneuvers. They weren't prepared for an enemy that simply ignored all defensive strategies and charged straight ahead. For 10 minutes, the Allied fleet flew through hell itself. Ships exploded around them constantly, but the survivors kept flying forward. The Indomitable's shields failed. Her HE 3 months after the Battle of Vega, the galaxy was still trying to understand what had happened. The Devourer threat was over. Their biomechanical ships drifted dead in space across 100 star systems, their collective consciousness shattered by the sacrifice of the Allied fleet. But the victory felt hollow to those who remained. Admiral Park So-young stood in her office on Earth, looking at reports from across the galaxy. Every day brought new messages of gratitude from species that had been saved by the sacrifice at Vega. The Vorthok Empire was calling it the greatest act of heroism in galactic history. The Nexari Collective had composed energy songs that would commemorate the fallen for thousands of years. The Threnody Republic was building monuments on every one of their worlds. But none of that brought back the brave souls who had died in that final battle. A soft chime indicated someone was at her. "First enter," she called. Commander Jang Minsu walked in carrying a data pad with the latest intelligence reports. He had been promoted to fill one of the many leadership positions left empty by the losses at Vega. Like everyone in the human fleet, he was still struggling with the magnitude of what they had lost. "Admiral, we're getting strange readings from the outer rim," he said, setting the pad on her desk. "Long-range sensors are detecting massive objects moving through deep space, heading toward our galaxy." Admiral Park picked up the pad and studied the data. What she saw made her blood run cold. The sensor readings showed objects larger than anything that had ever been detected, ships or structures that dwarfed even the massive Devourer vessels they had fought. "How big are these objects?" she asked. "The largest ones are approximately the size of Earth's moon," Jang replied. "And there are over 1 million of them, arranged in some kind of organized formation." Admiral Park sat down heavily in her chair. Just when the galaxy thought it was safe, something even bigger was approaching. "Any idea what they are?" "That's the strange part," Jang said. "The quantum signatures match Devourer technology, but they're much older. Whatever these things are, they've been traveling through space for a very long time." Before Admiral Park could respond, her communication system activated. The holographic display showed the faces of the remaining Federation leaders, the survivors who had managed to rebuild their fleets after the Devourer attacks. Crystal singer Yelthana of the Vorthok spoke first, her crystalline body glowing with worry. "Admiral Park, we assume you've seen the sensor data from the Galactic Rim." "I've seen it," Admiral Park replied. "What do your scientists think we're looking at?" War Marshal Kekthon of the Threnody clicked his mandibles nervously. "Our analysis suggests these are the original Devourers, the parent civilization that created the biomechanical ships we fought. If our calculations are correct, they've been traveling through the void between galaxies for millions of years." Energy Marshal Lexandra of the Nexari pulsed with dim light. "The quantum entanglement disruption at Vega must have reached them across space. They're coming to investigate what happened to their children." Admiral Park felt a chill run down her spine. The Devourers they had fought at Vega had been scouts, advanced ships sent ahead of the main civilization. Now the real enemy was coming, and they made the previous threat look small by comparison. "What's the Federation's plan?" she asked. The alien leaders looked uncomfortable. Finally, Crystal Singer Yelthana spoke for all of them. "Admiral, our fleets are still rebuilding after the previous attacks. We have perhaps 1,000 ships between all our species, and most of them are damaged. We cannot face an enemy of this magnitude." "So you're planning to run away again?" Admiral Park said flatly. "We're planning to survive," War Marshal Kekthon replied. "Our scientists have calculated escape routes to neighboring galaxies. If we begin evacuation immediately, we can save perhaps 10% of our populations, and abandon the other 90% to die." "Admiral," Energy Marshal Lexandra said gently, "humanity has already sacrificed more than any species should be asked to sacrifice. No one expects you to stand alone against this threat." Admiral Park looked at each of the alien faces on her screen. These were the representatives of civilizations that had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years, and they were ready to abandon everything they had built rather than fight. "Thank you for informing me," she said. "Humanity will consider our options." After ending the communication, Admiral Park sat in silence for several minutes. Commander Jang waited patiently, understanding that his superior was wrestling with an impossible decision. "How many ships do we have left?" she finally asked. 87 combat vessels of various sizes," Jang replied. "Most of them are still repairing damage from previous battles. We also have about 300 civilian ships that could be converted for military use, against 1 million enemy vessels." "Yes, ma'am." Admiral Park stood up and walked to her window, looking out at Earth. The blue and green planet looked so peaceful from space, with no sign of the billions of people living their lives on the surface. They had families, hopes, dreams for the future. They deserved better than to die because their leaders were too afraid to fight. "Send a message to all human ship commanders," she said. "Emergency meeting in 2 hours. And Yang?" "Yes, Admiral. Start working on plans to convert every civilian ship we have into a warship. If we're going to make a stand, we'll need every vessel we can get." 2 hours later, the briefing room was packed with the surviving officers of the human fleet. Many of them were young, promoted to fill positions left empty by the heroes who had died at Vega. They looked tired and worn down by months of fighting impossible odds. Admiral Park stood at the front of the room and activated the holographic display, showing the approaching threat from the galactic rim. "Ladies and gentlemen, the galaxy is facing extinction again," she began. "The original Devourer civilization is approaching with over 1 million ships, each one larger than anything we've ever faced. The other Federation species are planning to evacuate and abandon the galaxy to save a fraction of their populations." Murmurs of anger and disbelief rippled through the room, but Admiral Park held up her hand for silence. "Humanity has a choice," she continued. "We can join the evacuation and hope to find safety in another galaxy, or we can do what we've always done when faced with impossible odds." Captain Lee Sung-jae of the cruiser Dauntless stood up. He was one of the few senior officers to survive the battle at Vega, having been assigned to Earth's defense fleet instead of the suicide mission. "Admiral, with respect, we have less than 400 ships against 1 million enemies. Even if we converted every civilian vessel, we'd still be outnumbered thousands to 1. "That's correct," Admiral Park agreed. "The mathematics are clear. We cannot win a conventional battle. Then what are you proposing?" Admiral Park smiled grimly. "I'm proposing we stop fighting conventional battles. I'm proposing we do something so crazy, so impossible, so completely human that it might actually work." She changed the holographic display to show detailed scans of the approaching enemy fleet. "Our analysis of the Devourer technology we captured at Vega has revealed something interesting. These original Devourers aren't just biomechanical ships, they're refugees." The room fell silent as the officers processed this information. "Refugees?" Captain Kim Yuna of the destroyer Swift asked. "Refugees from what?" "We don't know," Admiral Park admitted. "But the quantum signatures in their technology show they've been fleeing through space for millions of years. Whatever they're running from, it's something that scared them enough to consume entire civilizations for fuel. Captain Lee frowned. What does that change? They're still coming to destroy us. Maybe they are. Or maybe they're just desperate and afraid. Admiral Park replied. Think about it. They sent scouts ahead to find inhabitable worlds, but when those scouts were destroyed, they came to investigate. That's not the behavior of mindless conquerors. That's the behavior of a species trying to survive. The room buzzed with conversation as the officers discussed this new perspective. Finally, Commander Park Ji-hoon of the science vessel Discovery spoke up. Admiral, are you suggesting we try to communicate with them instead of fighting them? I'm suggesting we try something that no other species would ever consider. Admiral Park replied. I'm suggesting we try to help them. The room erupted in surprised voices. Captain Lee stood up again, his face showing disbelief. Help them? They've consumed hundreds of worlds and killed trillions of people. Because they were starving and desperate, Admiral Park said firmly. Yes, they've done terrible things, but humans have always believed that even enemies can become friends under the right circumstances. She paused and looked around the room at the faces of her officers. What if instead of fighting them, we offered them something they've never had before, a home where they don't have to keep running? Captain Kim shook her head. Admiral, this is incredibly dangerous. If you're wrong about their intentions, we'll all be dead. If we fight them conventionally, we'll all be dead anyway, Admiral Park pointed out. At least this way we have a chance to save not just humanity, but the entire galaxy. The debate continued for hours as officers argued about the wisdom of trying to negotiate with an enemy that had already proven its destructive capabilities. Some supported Admiral Park's. The day of first contact arrived with the quiet tension of a held breath. Admiral Park So-young stood on the bridge of her flagship, the newly commissioned UFS Harmony, watching as the original Devourer fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system. The sight was overwhelming. Over 1 million biomechanical vessels, each one the size of a small moon, arranged in perfect formation across several light years of space. My God, whispered Captain Lee Sung-jae, who was serving as her tactical officer. I've never seen anything so massive. The lead ships were clearly ancient beyond measure. Their biomechanical hulls showed the scars of millions of years of travel through the void between galaxies. Strange growths and crystalline formations covered their surfaces, giving them the appearance of living mountains that had learned to fly among the stars. Are our communication systems ready? Admiral Park asked. Dr. Han Minjung looked up from her xenobiology station. As ready as they can be, Admiral. We've programmed the universal translator with every piece of Devourer language we could extract from the captured biotechnology. But there's no guarantee they'll understand our intentions. And our fleet? 387 ships spread across the system, Captain Lee reported. Most of them are converted civilian vessels with minimal weapons. Against what we're facing, they're essentially defenseless. Admiral Park nodded. Their plan didn't rely on military strength anyway. If she was wrong about the Devourer's intentions, no amount of weapons would save them. If she was right, weapons wouldn't be necessary. Send the message, she ordered. The communication beam lanced out across space, carrying humanity's first words to the original Devourer civilization. The message was simple but profound, a mathematical proof of non-aggression followed by quantum-encoded transmissions of human history, art, music, and literature. Most importantly, it included records of every time humans had helped refugees, every instance where enemies had become friends, and every example of humanity's fundamental belief that all sapient beings deserved a chance at peace. For long minutes, there was no response. The massive fleet hung motionless in space, their biomechanical forms pulsing with the absorbed energy of 1,000 consumed worlds. Then slowly, the lead ship began to move. It was a vessel larger than any space station humanity had ever built, covered in organic growths that had been shaped by millions of years of evolution and adaptation. As it approached, smaller ships detached from its hull like cells dividing from a parent organism. Admiral, Dr. Han said urgently, I'm detecting massive quantum activity from their ships. They're communicating internally, processing the information. We sent them. What kind of response are they having? It's hard to interpret, but the quantum patterns suggest confusion, curiosity, and something that might be hope. The lead ship continued its approach until it was only a few thousand kilometers from the Harmony. At that distance, its size was truly overwhelming. A living mountain of biomechanical technology that could have crushed the human flagship without noticing. Then it spoke. The communication came not as words or signals, but as direct quantum transmission that bypassed their technology and spoke directly to their minds. The voice was ancient beyond measure, carrying the weight of millions of years and the memories of countless extinct civilizations. Small ones, it said, why do you not flee? We are the Thalaxi, the eternal wanderers, the keepers of the dead. We have consumed galaxies and preserved the memories of the fallen. Why do you remain when others have fled? Admiral Park took a deep breath. This was the moment that would determine the fate of not just humanity, but potentially the entire galaxy. We remain because running away is not what humans do, she replied using the quantum communication frequency. We remain because we believe that even ancient enemies can become friends. We remain because we want to offer you something you've never had before, a home. The silence that followed seemed to last forever. Then the ancient voice spoke again, and this time it carried a note of something that might have been wonder. Home? We have wandered the void for 7 million years. Fleeing the silence that devours light itself, we have consumed the memories of 10,000 species to keep their essence alive within us. We know not the meaning of this word, home. Then let us teach you, Admiral Park said. Let us show you that there are other ways to preserve life, besides consuming it. Let us prove that cooperation is stronger than consumption. Dr. Han was monitoring the quantum transmissions flowing between the Thalaxi ships. Admiral, they're debating among themselves. The collective consciousness is experiencing something like internal conflict. Some want to test our sincerity, others fear it's a trap, and a significant portion seems curious about our offer. Hours passed as the two fleets faced each other in the darkness of space. The Thalaxi ships pulsed with internal light as their collective consciousness wrestled with concepts they had never encountered before. The human fleet waited patiently, knowing that their fate hung in the balance of this ancient debate. Finally, the lead ship spoke again. Show us, it said simply. Over the next several weeks, something unprecedented happened in the history of the galaxy. Human scientists worked alongside Thalaxi bioengineers to develop new technologies that could preserve civilizations without consuming them. The breakthrough came when they discovered that the Thalaxi's biomechanical bodies could be modified to create living archives, vast libraries that could store the knowledge and memories of entire species without requiring their destruction. The first test subject was a small Thalaxi ship that had been damaged in their journey between galaxies. Using human medical techniques combined with Thalaxi biotechnology, they were able to heal the vessel's injuries and restore its function without requiring it to consume organic matter for energy. This is remarkable, the ship communicated as it experienced health without hunger for the first time in millions of years. We had forgotten that existence was possible without consumption. More importantly, human historians and Thalaxi memory keepers worked together to create a new form of cultural preservation. Instead of absorbing civilizations into their collective consciousness, the Thalaxi learned to create symbiotic relationships where species could maintain their independence while contributing their knowledge to a vast galactic library. The transformation wasn't easy. The Thalaxi had spent so long as wandering consumers that many of them struggled to understand concepts like permanent settlement, individual identity, and voluntary cooperation. But with human patience and guidance, they began to adapt to a new way of existence. The real test came when the other Federation species returned from their attempted evacuation. The Vorthak, Nexari, and Threnodi fleets approached the Sol system expecting to find it consumed and empty. Instead, they found human and Thalaxi ships working side by side, building massive space stations that served as cultural centers and research facilities. This is impossible, Crystal Singer Yelthana transmitted from her flagship. The Devourers consume everything they encounter. How are you still alive? Because we offered them friendship instead of fear, Admiral Park replied. Because we chose to see refugees instead of monsters. Because sometimes the best way to win a war is to help your enemy remember why they started fighting in the first place. The integration process took months, but gradually the Thalaxi found their place in galactic civilization. Their ancient knowledge became invaluable for scientific research. Their biomechanical technology revolutionized medicine and engineering, and their collective memory provided insights into thousands of extinct civilizations. But perhaps most importantly, they learned to hope again. A year after first contact, Admiral Park stood on the observation deck of New Harmony Station, watching as human children played with young Thalaxi bioforms in the station's central park. The sight would have been unimaginable only months before. Representatives of two species that should have been mortal enemies, learning from each other and building something new together. Admiral, Dr. Hahn said as she joined Park at the viewing window, we're getting reports from the galactic rim. Long-range sensors have detected something approaching from deep space. Admiral Park felt a familiar chill. More Devourers? No, Dr. Hahn smiled. This is different. The quantum signatures match the descriptions the Thalaxi gave us of the other refugee fleets they've encountered over the millennia. It looks like word is spreading that there's finally a safe place for wanderers to rest. Over the following months, ship after ship arrived at the edge of Federation space. They came from dozens of different species. Ancient refugees who had been fleeing through the void for millions of years, survivors of civilizations destroyed by wars, natural disasters, and cosmic catastrophes. Each group had their own tragic history, their own reasons for wandering, their own desperate hope for a place to call home. And humanity welcomed them all. The galaxy that had once been ruled by three ancient powers now became something new. A confederation of hundreds of species, working together, sharing knowledge and resources, building a civilization based on cooperation rather than domination. At the center of it all was New Harmony Station, a massive structure built with technology from dozens of worlds, powered by the combined knowledge of countless civil